I'm Kyle Bulmann, front house engineer for Chance the Rapper. We're out on Chance the Rapper's Be Encouraged tour. We're using about 66 inputs on the tour between all the stuff on stage, playback and clear comms, shouts, things like that. My workflow on this console is actually pretty traditional. I keep most things in their respective layers. Like I keep my outputs for the matrices and everything on the top layer, and all my inputs I page through on the left side, and all my groups, stems, buses, things like that, solos are all in the middle here. I found myself on this console doing a lot more work on the output side instead of on the input side. So I'm routing a lot of things into stems that then have bus processing on them. So I don't really touch the inputs very often for the show. A lot of it's just routing fader levels for stems and buses. One of my favorite things about the console is the stem architecture, and one of the ways that I use it is to sum together different things that I want to process while still not having too many handles to have to grab on my output page. For example, I have two snare drum mics on the main snare, a top and a bottom, and they also have a snare 2, and they also have a snare 3. Those are auxiliary snares. One's very low pitched, one's very high pitched. But I want to be able to have all the snares into a single group that has the same type of compression and the same type of effects on it. So I have on a back page a stem for snare drums, and they all hit that snare, and that's where they get processed. And then from there, same thing with the kick drum. Kick and the snare feed a different stem, and then on my outputs layer here, I have a kick and a snare stem that gives me access to those parts where I need to boost it a little bit, pull it back a little bit, but I don't have to route everything on the input side as far as throwing it everywhere for plugins and processing. Another thing that's really nice about the stem architecture is the ability to route things after you've already processed them as well. So for me, what I do on the lead vocal for this show is actually, after it hits my group that I use to ride the fader, it actually gets split to 3 separate stems. One is for the main PA, one is for the front fills, and one's for the record feed. Each of those is going to sound a little bit different. It's going to have a little bit different needs. And the ability for those to all just live on a separate layer without having to access them during a show is great. I found it's pretty much never the case where I need the same EQ management on the main PA speakers as I do on the front fills. So instead of choosing just one blanket EQ that's going to degrade the sound of one of those things, I can actually just have the separate tools for the separate jobs, and you get the best possible sound for each application. My favorite aspect of the console has to be the way it sounds. It's got a bit of character to it that you can't really find in some other consoles, but the dynamics and the frequency response, it just reminds me of the way that a great analog desk sounds, and we're at a point in time where that's becoming harder and harder to find. You plug a great sounding source or a great sounding microphone into the console, and you pull it up and it comes to life. And at that point, you've got a starting point that you may have to work really hard just to get there on a separate console. But on this, I found myself having to do much less work out of the gate just to get something that I'm happy with as a starting point. The internal headroom is fantastic. You can find yourself needing a little bit more gas on a certain thing, and if that's feeding a bus, or if that bus is feeding a master, or that's feeding a matrix, you're really not going to get yourself into too much trouble by giving things a little bit of gas. You never hit a point where you feel like the sound is collapsing, or you feel like you're losing any of the dynamics, or things are starting to distort or get cloudy. It just really allows you to kind of run it hard, run it soft. It doesn't really mind. The sound doesn't necessarily change inside. It'll let you work however you want to work. One of my favorite things on this console that's helped my workflow is the dynamic EQ. It's super clean sounding. There's no intrusion out of band. It just has a fantastic invisible type sound to it, and it really only does what you want it to do. And that's something that I found is unique to this desk. Even third-party plugins, other consoles, it didn't really give me what I was looking for out of the dynamic EQ, but this is just the best I've used. Another great feature about this console is every channel has a built-in all-pass filter. So you can dial in a particular amount of phase shift at a given frequency band. So not having just a polarity inverse or a delay as your only tools, and having two different sources combined in a way that's not destructive. For example, a snare drum, a snare top mic and a snare bottom mic, it doesn't always line up so much that just using a phase inverse gives you the best summation. So you can use an all-pass filter to sort of dial it in and have those two sources combine in a way that gives you just a sound that you can't achieve with just straight delay or phase inversion. Overall, it's been a phenomenal experience. Honestly, having the L300 out last year for our tour was honestly, it was kind of a game changer. It allowed me to mix the show and approach the show in a way that I haven't been able to on any other console. And having a bigger show this year with more inputs, we were able to step up to the L500. And yeah, it's hard to go back. It's hard to think about going back, because really just about as happy as I could be on this.